The Houston Rockets 2021-2022 season comes to an end. Jalen Green putting his stamp on his rookie campaign closes things out with a 41-point performance. What a way for him to close out his rookie season. We're going to talk about his stellar performance, the way that he closed out his rookie season, a quick reflection on the season as a whole. And hey, the Houston Rockets finish with the worst record in the association, which means they controlled their destiny. They can finish with no less than a top 5 pick this NBA season. We're going to talk about all of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, also host of Locked On NBA Mondays, and founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, as well as at Clutch City CR. Going to get into a lot in today's episode. Jalen Green closes out his rookie season with a 41-point performance, a 40-piece for Jalen Green. A quick kind of reflection upon the season as a whole. And hey, we also had huge diehard Rockets fan Paulo Alves in the building for the final performance of the season. Talk about that experience and more, just how great the Houston Rockets fan community is, that experience, kind of seeing it unfold in real time. I'm going to talk about all of that. Got to let you know today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered more odds, at props, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Now, this performance by Jalen Green to close things out, we were manifesting a 40-piece from Jalen Green. I had kind of resigned myself to the fact that it wasn't going to happen, but Jalen Green goes from being questionable with an illness, right? He was questionable with an illness for this game to dropping a 41-point performance, the first 40-piece of his career. They were like force-feeding the ball to Jalen Green down the stretch of this game, trying to make it happen. And man, was it like just everything that I wanted to see, right? There was, Jalen had broken his career high with a few minutes left in the game. And it was about 3:22 left in the fourth quarter against the Hawks. And I needed to see every single offensive possession go through Jalen Green more than I needed air. Like, that's how badly I wanted to see this 40-piece happen. Jalen finished the night with 41 points on 14 of 26 shooting, 4 of 11 from distance, 9 of 11 from the charity stripe. He had just 1 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal, but the 41 points in 40 minutes played, the first 40-point game of his career. And it was such a beautiful way to cap off this Rockets season, right? To see Jalen Green go out there, and again, the array in which he was able to do so much of the way that he does his damage now. He talked about it post-game, and he's just finally comfortable, right? Like, he understands the game, the speed, all of it. He's finally comfortable out there. And I think, to me, one, he had the threes, which are great. He had the insane, behind his, reverse alley-oop slam dunk, because he's just an absolute walking highlight reel. But I think, to me, the play that was really just, that really stood out and really felt like, hey, this is a different version of Jalen Green, a better version, a more comfortable version, a more confident version, all of this, than what we saw earlier this season, was him splitting the defenders on the perimeter against the Hawks, getting into the paint, and then he changed direction at the last second and went up for the reverse layup. And it was a ridiculous series of moves to see him put together. Even just individually, some of the moves that he put, but to string all of those moves together on one single possession to get a bucket at the rim, Like, that's not something he would have been able to do earlier this season. And so the progression that we've seen from Jalen Green, the way that he's playing now versus earlier, is exactly what you would have hoped to see. And I walk away so impressed in how he's managed to grow within a season, right? Because the growth that he's going to take this offseason, right? There's so much work that gets put in behind the scenes as an NBA player, right? It's so much more than just the 48 minutes that you see on a basketball court that the fans get to kind of partake in. But to see him have the growth that he's had this season, to add and remove stuff from his game, to make the adjustments that he's made, that absolutely bodes well for his career as a future NBA superstar, because he was seeing things and adjusting to them in real time, sometimes within a given game, but on a game-by-game basis, he was noticing things, picking up on trends, the way that teams were defending him, all of that, and figuring out, okay, how do I attack this? Okay, they're going to close out on me like this. All right, cool. Okay, they're going to drop their big like this. All right, this is how I attack it. To see him process that in real time and watch it as the season moved on, to then see him close out the season the way that he did. Again, a 41-point performance to close things out. Went 30 plus in 6 of his last 7 games. That's ridiculous. He was breaking records left and right to close out the season. But for his rookie season as a whole, he finishes with 17.3 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, 2.6 assists, just 2 turnovers per contest, 42.6% shooting from the floor, 34.3% shooting from long range, 54.7% true shooting. Compared to all rookies, he leads all rookies in 40-point games. He's got 1. He's the only rookie to have a 40-point game. He has 8 30-point games. He has 26 20-point games, 10 games with 5 three-pointers made, and 19 games with 4 three-pointers made. An absolutely remarkable season for Jalen Green. He seriously, to dig a little bit deeper to how it looks compared to the other rookies, right? Jalen Green's the only rookie with a 40-point game, right? The next closest guy is Franz Wagner, and he's got a 38-point game. So a little close, didn't break 40. Most 30-point games, Jalen Green has 8. Jalen Green has 8 30-point games this season. The next highest rookie has 2. That's Cade Cunningham and Trey Mann. They each have 2 30-point games apiece. Most 20-point games, Jalen Green has 26. The next highest on the list has 25. So that's where you start to get back into the level of regular territory with rookies. Games with 4 three-pointers made, Jalen Green has 19. The next highest has 13 on the list. So Jalen Green has been making waves, has been doing stuff that seriously we haven't seen. Jalen Green's the first Rockets rookie since Hakeem Olajuwon to have 40 plus in a game. Anytime you are mentioned with Hakeem Olajuwon in the same sentence, you're doing something right. Jalen Green has been breaking all kinds of records, and it's so impressive to see. The future is incredibly bright for him. He is absolutely a future superstar. The only question is, will he finish as all-rookie first team, and will he finish within the top 3 for Rookie of the Year consideration? It'll be really interesting to see which direction the voters go with both of those awards, but I think Jalen's absolutely earned both of those metrics when it's all said, or now that it's all said and done, I should say. But coming up, I want to kind of reflect on the season a little bit as a whole, some of the other players who have, again, made their mark this Rocket season. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar, because when it comes to protein bars, you've got to check out Built Bar. They're the #1 protein bar on the market. They've got so many incredible flavors to choose from: raspberry, strawberry, mint brownie, peanut butter, salted caramel, cookies and cream, coconut brownie chunks, the #1 flavor. The list goes on and on and on, right? Honestly, the coconut brownie chunk, it is the best flavor. Go get that one. But seriously, these protein bars, they're the best protein bar on the market. They are covered in 100% delicious chocolate, every single bar, but they're not gritty or chalky. The consistency's never off like some other protein bars out there. And every single bar is going to be low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Amazing if you're on a keto diet. Amazing if you're trying to cut back a little bit, lose a little bit of weight. You can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, looking at the way the Rockets finished this season, obviously these last couple games, first off, the Rockets were leading heavily against the Toronto Raptors in that game Friday night and managed to institute just an absolute masterclass in tanking. The collapse in that game was nothing short of a miracle. Now, obviously, the way that things actually did play out, the Rockets could have managed to win one of these last two games and still finish guaranteed with the worst record in the association, because the Orlando Magic did win their final game of the season against the Miami Heat. Miami resting basically everybody in that game. And yeah, but the Rockets didn't want to chance it. And hey, I'm not going to complain with the way things played out. It absolutely worked out in the Rockets' favor, the way things did pan out. But in addition to Jalen Green, finishing the season the way that he did, Kevin Porter Jr. has been on an absolute tear. Against the Raptors, he finished with 35 on 12 of 23 shooting. He had 10 rebounds. He had 4 assists. He had 2 steals. He had a really strong game against the Brooklyn Nets, although some people were upset that he wasn't facilitating enough. And then against the Atlanta Hawks, KPJ walked away, had another very, very strong performance. 26 points on 10 of 24 shooting. He had 8 rebounds. He had 6 assists, only 2 turnovers. KPJ has come on incredibly strong here at the tail end of the season. And a big part of that has to do with the fact that he and Jalen Green are clearly the 1-2 options now to wrap up this Rockets season. Basically, ever since shutting down Christian Wood, Eric Gordon, and Dennis Schroeder, there's not really a question mark about, okay, who's going to take the shots, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. It's all just been flowing through Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, and they've looked significantly better because of that, because there's no question marks about hierarchy, who's going to get the most shots. It's very clearly, when you look at the Rockets offense here in the Hawks game, Jalen Green led the team with 26 shot attempts. Kevin Porter Jr. came in second with 24 shot attempts. And then Alperen Sengun came in third with 12 shot attempts. And that's absolutely the hierarchy that it should have been probably for a bit longer this season. But that's the hierarchy that I'm hoping that this Rockets team probably carries into next season, depending on what happens with Christian Wood and depending on what happens with their draft pick and who they actually, bring into the fold of this young Rockets team, because they've looked a lot better. You can tell that there's something special there with Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. as a backcourt. The way that they're able to kind of, I don't want to completely say play off of each other, because I do think that's been an area that they haven't exactly played off of each other incredibly well. But the fact that both of them look as good as they do with nobody else in the way, in front of them in the pecking order, that means something, right? You can see that there's something special there brewing, and it's just about putting the right pieces around them to be able to have the success that you the long-term future success that you really want out of this core of guys. And it's been a wild ride, obviously, this season. It's been a bumpy ride at points for Kevin Porter Jr. It's been a bumpy ride for Jalen Green at points this Rockets season, but we finally came to an end. And I want to take a second to kind of think back. We're going to dive into, in the coming days and weeks, we're going to dive into, moments, kind of recapping this season, reflecting on individual players from the season, reflecting on, games from the season, moments, all of that. But I want to take a second and kind of outline maybe my top 5, and it's hard to kind of put it in order, but I do think there's one moment that stands out for me above all else this season, and it's got to be the Rockets win against the LA Lakers in overtime, the Jalen Green takeover. That was the moment where you were like, oh, it's going to be like that, right? And The 10 straight points in overtime by Jalen Green to seal that game against the Lakers was just absolutely beautiful. It was like that. It was like his arrival moment to me, like where you started to see like, okay, this is a glimpse into the future of what he's really going to start doing on a regular basis, right? The 10 straight points in overtime, the 19 points combined overtime and fourth quarter. That has to be top of my list. It's hard to put these in like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 order. I do want to know your favorite moments. So you got to let me know in the YouTube comments. Go to the YouTube page and let me know your favorite moments. Give me your top 5 if you can, but give me your like number 1 favorite moments or a list of your favorite moments in the YouTube comments. I do want to read each and every one of those from you guys, but I got to go with the Lakers game, number 1 on my list. KPJ's game winner against the Wizards, and the immediate outpouring and the outcry of people like tagging Chris Mannix on Twitter, like all of that was nothing short of absolutely incredible. Obviously, Jalen Green's like close to the end of the season is definitely up at the top of the list. You've got to consider the 7-game win streak, right? Like that was a great feeling, but more specifically of the 7-game win streak, right? Like the 7th win itself, but like kind of in conjunction, right? So the very first win against the Chicago Bulls felt incredibly nice, but then the 7th win, spoiling James Harden's return to Houston, the MVP chance for Garrison Matthews throughout that game, like that was the height of the Gary Bird like era. So having that was incredible. Obviously, Jalen Green's 41 points to end the season. I actually can't decide which one's more special, right? The win against the Lakers and like the 10 straight points in overtime to shut out the Lakers and the way that win felt versus the 41 points to close out the season. Because the 41 points is special. It absolutely is. But the win against the Lakers was a win, right? And it was special because of the way that Jalen like pitched a shutout against LA in overtime. Like that was a huge, huge win. And you go all the way, you can go even further back to Jalen's first 30-point performance. The 8 triples against the Boston Celtics. Like that was an insane performance. Matched Michael Jordan for games needed to make it to 30-plus points for his NBA career. It took MJ 3 games to do it. It took Jalen Green 3 games to do it as well. And for me, like on a personal note, like being able to like ask Jalen about that post game and like see his reaction and all of that, like that was just kind of a crazy moment. So like I have differing, like, you know, my favorite moments might be a little bit different as far as like questions that you get to ask, all of that stuff. Like I'll have a soft spot for the San Antonio game that the Rockets wound up, you know, coming back in, and that was an incredibly special game because I got to, like, I was asking Steven Silas about the staggering of KPJ Jalen Green, and then he wound up staggering them that night. Like it was crazy. So there are so many memorable moments from this Rockets season, and despite them being the worst record in the association yet again, a second season in a row, there was so much fun to be had this season. Like it was, even though the Rockets did a lot of losing this season, there was a ton of fun this season. I think that needs to be an important takeaway is I thoroughly enjoyed this Rocket season. Like top to bottom, there were a lot of memorable moments, a lot of great takeaways, a lot of growth from the Rockets' young core, and that's the important part. That was the goal this season, was to see this young team grow, to see Jalen Green grow, and that was accomplished. So I want to know your favorite moments. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Let me know on Twitter, like at me on Twitter if you want to, and let me know your favorite moments from this Rocket season. But coming up, I do want to talk about the man of the weekend, Paulo Alves, who made a trip all the way across the ocean to be here in Houston to experience a couple Rockets games with a bunch of other diehard Rockets fans, all of that. We're going to talk about that. We'll do a Tankathon spin because we have to do a Tankathon spin, all of that coming up here in just a moment. But we got to get a quick word from our friends over at BetOnline, because BetOnline is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. Now, look, Rockets are winding down. Sure, tune into the Astros. Also, hey, it's NBA playoffs. The Rockets aren't going to be a part of it, but If you're interested in the latest odds for the NBA championship, you got the Phoenix Suns at plus 275. You got the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 550, the Brooklyn Nets at plus 700, and then rounding out the top five, you've got the Boston Celtics at plus 750 and the Golden State Warriors at plus 850. It makes me happy that the Warriors are that far down on the possible championship list, or the championship odds list, I should say. But BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast. From the first jump of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with analysis and insight affecting all 30 teams. I host the Monday show, always a ton of fun. Be on the lookout for that. Go check it out. Man, this past weekend, I actually looked up mid-recording and realized that my e-tonics are not on the shelf as per their usual home right behind me as part of this little backdrop setup that I've got. And it's because I was able to take them off the shelf and wear them this weekend, because Paulo Alves, arguably the most diehard international Rockets fan in existence, but definitely the most diehard Rockets fan based out of Portugal, was able to come overseas and spend a weekend here in Houston. Shout out to Paulo, who I hope he enjoyed his stay here in Houston. I hope he enjoyed his experience here in Houston. But it was great. We started the weekend off with in a huge way, experiencing the Rockets-Raptors game at Urban South HTX, hosted by the Summit State of Mind brothers, Kenny and Justin. If you're not listening to the Summit State of Mind podcast, you absolutely should be. Two brothers, two absolute diehard fans. Shout out to everybody, though, who came out to the watch party. So shout out to the brothers, Justin and Kenny, for hosting the watch party and hosting a memorable experience for Rockets fans that came through. Shout out to all the Rockets fans that were there, that introduced themselves, that said hi, that said what's up. So many different names. I'm honestly not going to be able to run through the entire list because the turnout was absolutely incredible. So many people coming out to support Paulo, to support his trip to the United States, to support the first time that he got on a plane, all his firsts, right? And we cataloged them all on Twitter. We're going to combine all the videos, all the photos, everything into a montage that you can see and experience. And it was just crazy to think about the little things that maybe we take for granted a little bit as Rockets fans, or as Houstonians, or as Texans, whatever. And seeing him try Whataburger for the first time, seeing him have Shipley's, seeing him experience chicken and waffles, just different cultural things that aren't there. And being a part of that experience and seeing him get to enjoy that. And then obviously seeing him get to interact with so many different Rockets fans. And it was really funny seeing people walk up to him and be like, hey, he's real. He exists. He's not just we're not Weekend at Bernie's-ing him. Oh Lord, that was tough. I shouldn't have tried that. He's not just living in your cell phone or in your computer, right? He's a real person. And to see people get to interact with him and say hi to him and all of that, it was such a heartwarming experience. And at the end of the day, look, social media is usually really toxic and pretty garbage for a lot of reasons, right? Twitter is a cesspool. It's a necessity if you're in the sports media industry. So, and I pretend I don't have an unhealthy addiction to Twitter and that I don't absolutely love it. But that said, it can be a really terrible place a lot of times, and it can be really damaging to your mental health. That said, Twitter can be a really incredible place as well. And this was an incredible thing, right? This group of guys getting together and doing something so special for Paulo, to get him overseas, to get him to experience a Rockets game. And then the people in the Rockets community that responded to this, right? The Rockets comping tickets for Paulo and showing him an incredible time. Shout out to the Rockets brass who turned up before the game had tipped off. Rafael Stone, Patrick Fertitta, and Rafael Stone, and Rafael Stone's wife, Felicia Stone, all turning up to interact and hang out with Rockets fans and talk and just shoot the shit and be down to earth, right? What other organizations do that? What other organizations have that level of connection and impact with their community, with their fans, to show up before the game, before tip-off of the final game of the season, and like take photos and interact with fans and do all this crazy stuff. That is absurd. I don't think there's a single other team in the NBA that's doing that is having that level of relationship with its diehard, like most loyal fans. And in a down year, that is absolutely important to see, right? The organization understands the impact and the drive that these fans have. And even though the Rockets have been the worst team in the NBA the past 2 seasons in a row, these fans are still pouring out support, be it on social media, be it in person by showing up to games and doing all this stuff. And it was just really a jaw-dropping, amazing experience. And to have even been a little tiny part of that for Paulo and for the other guys who were able to put that together. Shout out to Don, shout out to Brad, shout out to Zeke, shout out to Will, and shout out to Nima, who was also helping organize all of that for Paulo. That group of guys, really incredible individuals. And it was crazy to see like Paulo on the Toyota Center court shooting a free throw. He's an absolute bucket, by the way, like nailed it. And like seeing them get to meet like Craig Ackerman in person, seeing them get to meet Ryan Hollins in person. They got, after I had to leave to go deal with Locked On NBA duties as per my usual Monday role, and to look up on social media and see that they got to take photos with Alperen Şengün and Josh Christopher. Like this was a like once in a lifetime experience, and hopefully not once in a lifetime, right? Hopefully this kind of opens the doors for other like international fans to maybe like plan out, make trips, like come experience the city, and hopefully we can, get you overseas and show you a good time here in Houston, because Paulo is absolutely an honorary Houstonian now. Like there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like he was throwing up the H, like he'd been doing it his entire life, and it was an incredible experience to see, to be a part of, all of that. We'll get him and Don and the rest of the crew, rest of the guys on the show at various points throughout this offseason. We'll hear it from the man himself. We'll get him to recap some of his experience, as well as to come on and, unfortunately, spread the Paolo Banchero agenda here on Locked On Rockets, since he's still in that camp. Also, the Jabari Smith propaganda took a big hit when Jalen Green didn't mention Jabari Smith as far as some of the top prospects that he's been watching. He mentioned Jaden Ivey, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren by name specifically, not Jabari, unfortunately. Also, Jalen Green, we knew it was going to happen, but he did formally confirm in a media availability setting that he was going to be changing back to his number 4 next season. So that was confirmed. He got asked the question by the podfather himself, none other than Ben Dubose, Rockets Wire editor. And he kind of hesitated for a second and looked over at somebody and was like, "Can I answer the question?" And he confirmed that he is switching to jersey number 4 next season. So that is written in the books. It is confirmed, all of that. But the Rockets are doing their exit interviews Monday morning. We'll be breaking down all the information from that. They're not going to be available via Zoom or anything, so it'll just be a lot of live tweeting, video recording, all of that. So I'll try to get take as much video and get as much footage as I can, and then we'll hopefully be able to run it back here on the show itself. But it was the final game of the season. It was the final L of the season, which means we got to do one Tankathon spin here to wrap up the show. So let's run these numbers with the worst record in the association. And, ooh, best spin that I've had in a minute. The Rockets finished with the number 1 overall seed here. Number 1 overall seed, the number 1 pick. I say, you know what? This is the Rockets playoffs. It is the number 1 overall seed. I don't know why I'm correcting myself, but the Rockets come away with the number 1 pick here on this Tankathon spin. The Sacramento Kings and the Lakers, who I guess it gets conveyed to New Orleans, jump up 5 spots each to 2 and 3. Orlando and Detroit both fall down to 4 and 5. That's just tough for those guys, honestly, to see Sacramento and New Orleans jump up over them. But with the number 1 overall pick in the 2022 NBA Tankathon simulation here for today's episode of Locked on Rockets, I'm going to pick Jabari Smith Jr. because I'm still in the Jabari jungle, or a Jabari jabroni, if you will, because apparently that's the other phrase that is catching on social media. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. I am so looking forward to the off-season content, all the draft content that we've got lined up, everything that we're going to be doing on the show here. But as always, appreciate you for tuning in. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to the show. Apple, Spotify, Google, brand new Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Also, be sure to check out the show on YouTube. Search Locked on Rockets on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that. Our very next episode is going to be breaking down all of the exit day interviews for the Houston Rockets. Rafael Stone, Steven Silas, select players are all going to be talking to the media. We're going to break down all of that for you and more. But as always, thank you so much for watching, so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.